Yeah. But I'm live. Yeah. But most people on the East Coast, like,
Nope. Charles is back there. So if you want, you can always.
It tastes exactly like yeah, and then that's the sausage, and then that's the cheese.
I'm doing another 3-day beginning of October.
Coconut oil is my
3-day
favorite.
fast beginning of October.
It's called BioLife. This one's called Chow. Yeah, when we go to
Yeah, I did one.
Yeah.
What was it? July.
Yeah.
I think it was July. I did one, and my friend, he said that he does one every quarter. So I was like, you know what? I'll hop on that bandwagon. 60 hours is where I realized that's the when you can get to 60 hours after that, it's freaking easy.
It's all mental. We go to the goals right there. It's so nice because it's like you guys ever want to meet like on the next Wednesday. Meet us up like 10:30. It's so clean. Oh, that's right. You guys don't. Well, we have a hookup there too. So we're kind of tired. Everyone is food. You working? Yeah, dude. It's so
so when I did, my friend started it at.
I saw Lord.
So that was in the majority of the festival.
You guys have
Oh yeah, she did. It wasn't thinking about food. It wasn't thinking about eating. It was just like I was flat.
Yeah, we should have the share.
Ice cream time was like
So what we really need to do is like us four will just go to the
What are you doing? Have a good day.
Overall,
so you just do cashew cheese, you do any kind of other.
Then that's a plan.
But
That's how I don't worry about honey, except for a couple of things.
and
My
eggs.
case, but it doesn't really matter if there's
And then
nutrition in there. I want flavor. I can go overboard with unhealthiness. But if someone says, "Hey, that's healthy," but you just eat it.
Yeah. If you want to give me, I'll actually start a couple of you.
maybe with like 3 or 4.
But yeah, Rowdy, I gotta be Rowdy. What he was saying, it just
You know what's crazy? He might eat here today. He normally comes. He normally comes.
Let me know what I gotta do.
Yours just doesn't have to be 12. That's why yours doesn't think that.
my veins are actually not exposed.
Yeah, because you got some yesterday. I think you just 2 days ago.
Thomas, thank you, dude. Killed it.
Oh, I didn't like the line up.
Get excited.
Dude, tell me about why some spots are super dark and some spots are not. Is it all about like how?
You know, it's crazy. Like I did 2, and only this one was like really.
Does it have to do with like the actual like blood not coming to? Yeah, dude, that's why it's ridiculous.
I'm gonna get it.
It's like the jujitsu meal.
But I had really bad knee. This is on now.
Yeah.
Dude,
This is when I was eating maybe 1 or 2 meals a day at my ex's house. So everything else I was eating at home was like the stuff that I really wanted to eat. So acai was like a go-to all the time.
Talked with Thomas before he came to meet up with you guys.
I'm gonna do your right arm.
Alright. Because I put a lot of like olive oil in.
Did Neil's my hair?
It's like calories. Not a lot of food.
Yeah.
But it's like
I got a couple shots. I'm not afraid of needles. I'm a man, damn it. I eat veggies.
I heard that deep voice Thursday. Workout.
Yep.
But that's not a lot, really. I'm making some content here, but I'm ready for something. Okay, so got really quiet. Rob's working on gaining some bicep size and trying to work on the biceps.
Dude, I haven't done a curl.
Oil
in
injection.
I haven't done a curl like in a year. I don't know
What?
the last
That's
time.
so
I mean,
sick.
you're doing kettlebell curls all the time.
No.
Well, but not strict curls, but in your movements. Though.
Yeah, I mean when I do jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, but I haven't done
You look
this.
so good, bro.
Like, I don't even remember the last time I did it.
Isn't my mom so
I'm
cute?
good.
That's your mom?
So, you didn't read the
I
thing.
didn't.
I
Sorry, I rushed the compliment.
My bad.
Yeah, my college was used to.
Ooh.
What do I?
But
Cool.
on
Good.
the next
Good.
one,
Fine.
So
How do you like the needles?
Yeah, those valves.
Start running this. I'm gonna go kind of slow here.
Dude, we gotta get our Instagram. Let's go. Oh, well, let's go ahead and market this.
Figure out how to monetize your mouth.
You're gonna feel it a little bit. There's a needle in your arm, or C plus in your arm, but it shouldn't hurt.
Looking great. I'm good.
Oh,
Starts coming through.
Let's go, dude. Like, okay, well, yeah.
Are they good?
Dude, CJ gave me the wrong here yesterday.
Yeah, we got all the free
I'm about to just be like, guys.
It's the girls grown right here. So everyone.
Oh yeah, Ross.
Everyone's
Did Brian ever get back to you?
He messaged me.
Well, you can also do it.
Texted me.
I'm sorry, dude. I'm gonna go with the highest quality.
I'm just waiting.
Because, like, fucking
I'm waiting for a text back.
like,
See my text today. He'll text me today. Hopefully.
I don't like commercials.
Oh,
some of them.
So
You're too much.
Yeah,
I guess Lulu
I wouldn't do this.
7, Lulu 7 or 6.
I see you on that.
I like this. I like new
Preemptive.
Yeah.
I like. I just like
Shorts are
the
lighter.
their shirts are long shorts.
Right, you're
That's-
I'm gonna
yeah.
squeeze on your
Yeah,
wrist.
chest separation too and all that, like, it feels like
So flex, yeah.
it feels like something on me.
They're good.
You know, my
Real present.
We're gonna try to.
Oh, so I met this,
It's got Sandy and TLG in it. It's a wonderful serotonin dopamine booster. Just throw it under your tongue.
I was at this.
Yeah, that's all there
I
is.
met this-
It's pretty tart for the.
But she had those tattoos. So I told her, that they're tattoos.
I was like, I cannot do boots right now, bro.
And she's actually been looking for an apprenticeship in the area, and she wants to get
Right now?
into
Is this gonna break my
tattoos,
fast?
so that she can get started. She's like, I have my gear. And I think she said she has to order a couple more things because she lost or whatever stuff.
Where was that?
Say again?
Where was this?
I was at a hotel, the hotel that like just opened. And yeah, when she said that, I was like, I have a friend who does tattoos. I was like, I'll talk to her and see if there's any way y'all can get connected because she's young. There was something about her. Like I felt like one of those people I felt like I needed to tell her. And yeah, so I sent her your profile and she said that she loved the like realism. Like it was like my vibe. And but I'll send you her profile. Definitely reach out to her. She's really good. I was like, I feel like
That's a good thing. He's got blood pressure.
So I don't have blood pressure.
Nah, it's just better at controlling it.
Is that acai right there?
Ross, who's doing
Have you guys had acai?
Yeah,
It's good. What was that?
You can bend it.
Mike,
In your arms, just don't bend it up too much.
Somebody else sent me
Slow
up today.
that.
Told me that they did research for your
Nectar.
kids.
Nectar, that's right.
And you ship it away.
Yeah, somebody today. I met them.
Okay, you feel it going in?
It's at
How
see home.
you doing?
Fine.
All right, now we're done
It's a good, they had a good stuff
talking.
there. I think it was-
All right, let's get this show on the road.
Everyone shut up.
I got 2 IVs in. That's about us. Everyone enjoy the bliss. I'll tell you this right now. This is my favorite supplement. This is a serotonin dopamine booster. You can take it now if you want. This takes effect pretty quickly, but it's essentially a natural antidepressant. I kind of, you can think about it in that sense. Serotonin and dopamine is important in the body when it comes to not only mood, but just function. And if you've ever heard one of the talks here at the Lunch and Learn, it's proudly sponsored by Prep Junior. You actually have heard me talk about serotonin and dopamine many a times before because they're neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are essentially how we function. what everyone's getting in their wonderful IDs and their supplements and then the bliss, you're getting nutrients in order to function better, right? The whole reason why we eat food and we have, meals is to get nutrients, sustenance, right? Like we talked about.
Yep.
So if you have an approach to overall health, there has to be a balance, right? I look at it from a scientific standpoint. I understand neurotransmitters. I also understand hormones, which is why we're here today. It's funny and coincidental that the estrogen talk features a room full of guys, which is awesome. But it's important to y'all as well, because the title is "Why is estrogen making you fat?" is kind of a catch-22. We do need estrogen. There is actually a lot of estrogen in this room. The issue is that men make a little bit of it. We don't need a whole lot of it, right? And if you think about it, when it comes to hormone replacement therapy, there are many people who will tell you women need testosterone therapy, right? Because it's essentially a part of who they are. It's what they make. They need it, right? But you don't see me rushing and saying, hey, you're a guy, you need estrogen. Because that's not the case, right? There has to be a balance with everything. And so estrogen is not necessarily a horrible hormone for a woman, but for a guy, it needs to be in check. Yeah. Right? That's really how you have to look at it, right? So what is estrogen? So estrogen is a sex hormone, right? And when you think about hormone balance therapy, you have to look at the endocrine system, right? And we focused on this before with the thyroid last week. Your endocrine system controls all your hormones, right? And so there's a check and balance response, right? A negative and positive feedback. You need more testosterone because you're working out 6 times a week now, you'll get more testosterone production if you're within range, right? And I mean range as in you're under 30, right? As you get older, it's harder for guys to produce more testosterone because there's a deficiency. Call it life, call it stress, whatever you want, but eventually you're not going to produce as much as you did before. That was the mentality for the past 20, 30 years. Bodybuilders changed that mentality. And I actually commend them because you think about it, they're scientists. If you ever talk to a bodybuilder, they will run circles around you what they're taking. You don't even want to know what I'm taking, bro. You don't even, I'm getting it from Canada. I got some horse stuff coming in, like, yeah, guys mix it in the bathtub. Like, I mean, yeah. And so I had a guy come in one time, bring, amino acid, and on the side of the vial, it had a picture of a horse and a dog. And like, what do you think about this? I was like, it looks like it's for a dog, man. I don't know. Like, I treat humans. I don't know what to tell you, right? So I don't recommend it. But the truth is that you're looking at a way to manipulate the body to get a better response. That's all bodybuilders have ever wanted. They want gains, right? They want more muscle, right? But at the same time, they figured out a long time ago, you got to take care of those hormones, baby, because if you don't, not only are you not going to get the gains you're looking for, but it throws you off in function. So the bodybuilders that have the depression along with testosterone replacement are missing the boat, right? Because there's something going on that they're not metabolizing what they're giving their bodies. And what happens is an inflammatory response develops. Now, as you're feeling the NAD in your IVs, this is a detox that's going through your system, all right? You need to do a detox every once in a while, and I say every once in a while, depending on what goes on with your genetics, your nutrition, and your hormones, and your endocrine system, right? You need to do a detox almost all the time because we're constantly surrounded by stressors that are going to cause inflammation. Estrogen is one of those byproducts of stress. Guys need estrogen, women need estrogen a whole lot more, right? And the crazy thing about it is when you have stress in your life, you produce estrogen, more of a production of it, right? So as you get older, guess what? Men are fortunate enough to be able to produce testosterone up to a certain age, and then it starts decreasing, but not that same point. That estrogen is still firing. It can still fire even more because menopause, just like menopause, can actually produce the same type of issue. They produce estrogen as well. So the truth is, when a woman goes through menopause, it's not necessarily the whole truth when they say you're not producing estrogen. You are producing estrogen. You're just producing very inflammatory estrogen because a woman will make 4 different estrogens within a lifetime, right? And they're labeled E1 through 4, all right? Now, E4 is kind of the outlier. We still don't really know what it's for yet, okay? But we do kind of know what the first 3 are for. The first one is called estrone, E1. The second one is estradiol. And the third one is estrol. Now, the second one is what women will make before pregnancy. You're making this as a young, healthy woman. This is what makes you feel like a woman. When you get pregnant, you make E3. When you go into menopause, you produce the first one, estrone. Okay, now I'm going to focus on this for a second. Here's why estrogen can be detrimental depending on the person. So estrone is the estrogen that women produce in menopause, which means you're not producing the kind that makes you feel like a woman anymore, which sucks because that's when a woman complains about night sweats and hot flashes and there's I don't feel like myself, I can't lose weight. Well, I already checked my thyroid, it's menopause. What do? You basically recommend hormone replacement therapy. Here's some estrogen. I feel great. Woman comes back and says, man, I feel amazing. It's just like a guy who takes testosterone. You try to take away testosterone from a guy who's been on it for a couple years. They're basically going to give you a cockeyed look and say, that's not going to happen. A woman will do the same thing, but she might call you a few names and say, that's not going to happen because you don't want to see what I was like beforehand, which is true. The problem is board recommendations have now decreased hormone replacement therapy and estrogen for women from 5 years maximum to 1 year. And it's possible, and I shouldn't say they've done it yet, but it's heading that way. A new research article came out that said, hey, more than 1 year of estrogen replacement therapy for a woman after menopause could increase risk of cancer. Why? That's the question. Why would me giving you what you're missing cause something like that? I go back to the 4 different estrogens. What are we giving you, right? Because if I'm giving you synthetic estrogen, guess what it's going to convert to? E1, estrone, right? Just remember, estrone, E1, inflammatory one we can all produce. There's receptors for it throughout the entire body. If you produce estrone from synthetic estrogen, to me, most of the breast cancers, the ovarian cancers, all of those inflammatory responses have been linked to E1. And there's something to be said for that because in the body, just like with the endocrine system, all of your hormones have receptors throughout the body, right? Just because you produce testosterone in your testes doesn't mean that's the only thing that's going on down there with it. Testosterone and estrogen affect the brain because there's receptors for it in the brain. It affects your lungs. It affects your heart. It affects your bones. Yes, estrogen affects your bones. Think about it. A woman that goes through menopause is most likely to have osteoporosis risk, right? Just goes hand in hand. So then what happens is after a while you say, okay, well, where's all this estrogen going? Why is it migrating to these areas and causing issues? Okay, we'll go back to the estrogen receptors out the body. Imagine I'm a cell, and I'm a cell that has hundreds of receptors on the cell membrane, which outlines the cell, which means that at any point I can attach the estrogen. At any point I can attach the testosterone. At any point leptin, ghrelin, adiponectin, and you get the picture, right? TSH comes into the mix. So we can actually have signal hormones that we converse with, right? You think about the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal axis, right? It's all a negative feedback system, right? Or positive if you really want to think about it that way, right? So what's going on with your estrogen? The estrogen is basically coming into your body and it's being metabolized to inflammatory estrogen. If you have receptors throughout the entire body, think of them as you have an alpha and a beta, okay, receptor. The alpha receptor is going to be more likely found in the ovaries and the uterus and the breast tissue. The beta alpha receptor is going to be found in the brain, the heart, the lungs, the bones, the kidneys. Estrone is more likely to be attracted to the alpha or the beta? Alpha. So synthetic estrogen and synthetic byproducts of xenoestrogens, phytoestrogens are going into our bodies and causing our bodies to produce estrone. And if that's the case, look at your inflammatory response and how can you just feed that response, right? We're not talking about it. When these research articles say estrogen's being given to women and that's why the issue's going on, they're not saying it's estradiol that they're giving them. They're not saying it's E3 that they're giving them. Because guess what? On the alpha beta receptor line, going back to the estrogen, alpha, estrone, inflammatory estrogen, that's the one it attracts. The beta attracts sometimes estradiol, but E3. It attracts E3. So here's a lesson for you. You guys don't know this, but you'll know this now. When you go into the doctor's office for a prescription for hormone replacement therapy, you can go get it from a custom compounded pharmacy, right? You can get your testosterone, any kind of oil you want, right? Cypionate, it can come in oil that comes from grapes, comes from olive, whatever, right? Cottonseed. A woman's compounded estrogen does come from different sources, but the way that you actually break it down is I can literally give you E2 or E3. I don't have to worry about E1. I'm not giving you a synthetic one. In the sense, I'm kind of giving you an organic estrogen. And if you're getting that, I'm more likely thinking it's going to migrate over to the beta side and maybe be protective, because research has shown that E3 has been protective in the body against inflammatory estrogen. It's a huge deal. It's a bold statement. So now we're thinking is, what's your source of estrogen that you're putting in your body, right? Are you thinking wild yams? Are you thinking soy? Are you thinking tofu? This is why I don't like soy. Izzy doesn't like soy for many reasons, but I don't like soy because when it comes down to the estrogen response, soy gets metabolized most likely into estrone, phytoestrogen, right? Xenoestrogen. You think about the aluminum issue and a lot of the products that we consume, household products, for example, antiperspirants, right? They have aluminum in there. So when you get that and you actually put that in here, it gets absorbed. Where does it go? If your detoxification system is off, if you don't methylate correctly. Genetically, I was like, man, I get sick all the time. I just have a compromised immune system. What's more likely going to happen for a person that's sick all the time, that has poor gut health, that's depressed all the time, if they're eating soy the whole time? If they're genetically off, and cytokines we know can literally be caused by our negative thoughts, they're in inflammatory mode. Where do you think that estrogen is being produced? It's being produced in the E1. If you look at a guy's perspective, take the guy that takes a bunch of testosterone, right? You know who this is. They shoot whatever. They don't have any idea how much the limit is, and they're getting it from a friend. I asked them, how much you taking? 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams a week sometimes. Astronomical. It's, and they've been doing it for years. Now look, you go to that point, there's no coming down to a middle ground, right? Most of the time people will say, I'll do 400 at the most. And they push it, right? 400 is still a lot, because what happens is you shut down your own signals, right? You shut down your own production cycle. And just like a woman who's on birth control, what happens to the body when you suppress a sex hormone that's being produced every single month for the idea that you're supposed to procreate? I mean, I just think about how many women now have fertility issues when they've been on the pill for 14 or 15 years. And you know what estrogen that is? Synthetic estrogen. 14 years, a person's been taking synthetic estrogen orally to suppress child-making ability. Antiperspirant for those 14 years because they have to get the heavy-duty kind with the extra aluminum in it, because guess what? They sweat a lot more. And then they've been drinking cow milk. They went vegan, decided to go tofu, tempeh. What else we have? BPA, MSG, aspartame, glyphosate. What else can we think of that would cause them? Just go spray a bunch of Roundup on a woman right now and just see what happens. Honestly. Stress. And the stress that you talk about could be mental stress, right? Just depression, anxiety, body issues, eating disorders, the same shit that we all go through. All guys go through that too. So all your inflammatory responses can be causing estrogen production, right? Your sugar that you love to eat all the time, with like I do, is going right to your fat cells and causing them to be inflamed. Because guess what? When you eat that sugar, where does it get stored? It gets stored in your fat cells. What kind of sugar are you storing in your fat cells? Is it aspartame from 10 years ago? Is it sweet and low for 8 years ago? Is it xylitol now? Is it raw sugar cane? The body knows how to metabolize certain things. It doesn't know what the hell aspartame is. Like, what the hell is this? Looks like sugar. I'm going to put it to the side. It stores it in a muscle. It stores it in an organ. It stores it in a fat cell. And it forgets about it for 14 years. It comes back later and says, guess what? You're BRCA1 positive. You have the genetic risk for breast cancer. You've been eating aspartame this whole time. Damn. It's not the birth control that you were on for 14 years, because they're not going to think about that right away. Hell no, right? They're not going to think about the aspartame for 14 years when this chick was dieting, the diet sodas being marketed to her. They don't say any of that. And then yet they get looped into this idea of saying, like, you can't have the hormone that's designed for you. Guys can have all the freaking testosterone they want, get it off the streets, inject themselves at home, do it for 30 years. And all you got to do is make sure that prostate's not really, inflamed. You're not thickening your blood. What do you care about your signals being shut down at that point? You're getting testosterone. You're probably going to manipulate a way to where you can produce it at a long rate as well, longer term, because that's how you function. But a woman needs the same thing as well. And it's the weirdest thing in the world now to hear that a woman is going to be, well, let's talk about it. In the South, there's been some laws recently where you can't even think about getting an abortion. And now they're basically going to say, you can't have the hormones that you need in order to function. They're going to restrict that at a certain point too, which is nuts. Because I'm not a woman, and I'll be damned if I tell you what the hell you can do with the body. If you want the hormones, get it. If you tell it to a guy to say you're not going to get testosterone, that ain't going to happen. They're giving pellets of testosterone to women every day. Like right now, there's a lady that's getting a drill into the side of her right now with testosterone, just testosterone, maybe estrogen. But guess what? Just like hormone balance too, what else comes with estrogen production in women? Progesterone, right? There's an Implanon pill, not pill, I shouldn't say, it's a implantation. You stick it in the bicep of the woman's arm, and it just stays there, constantly releasing progesterone to suppress the body's production for ovulation. That's fairly new. That when I was in like my rotations and learning that, I mean, that was going on. And I'd see a bunch of women coming in my OBGYN rotations all day, easy. Didn't have to take a pill. You didn't have to worry about the IUD, which is mainly not the copper one's the safest one. But yeah, because if you tell a woman like, hey, you got to go on birth control, and now they hear this, they're like, well, I don't want the birth control pills. Give me the Implanon. What does that do? Truth is, we don't know. But I'll tell you this. In the menstrual cycle, this is how it works. Day one is when your ovulation starts, right? It's technically not the day of menses, right? It's the day when you're starting. Day 7, it starts rising. Day 14, your estrogen and progesterone at its highest production. At that point, you are your most fertile. If guys have any kind of cycle like that, you got to imagine there's peaks throughout the month as well that you have testosterone production that's increased, right? After day 14 for the woman, it goes back down, and day 21, it comes back up. And if nothing's been used, sloths off. There you go. So if you think about it, you can check blood work now to see where the production of estrogen and progesterone both are at. You mix in these two other tests that are called FSH and LH, and now you have signals from the brain that go to your ovaries and tell you to produce more estrogen. If you catch it at the right time and with the cycle and say, what day are you supposed to be on? I'm supposed to be on 20. Not happy anymore. If you're on day 21, you should have a little bit more estrogen production than that, and you're not there. And the signals are increasing from the brain, which basically tells me you're about to go into menopause. That woman is using their late 40s to early 50s. That's actually usually, I mean, what was the last time you checked in school, right? What was the typical age for menopause? 47 starting, Charles?
I want to say 45.
Okay, so it's getting lower. But I meet 30-year-old women talking about hot flashes. I'm like, what the hell do you need to be going through this for? But it happens. And it's crazy because they're out there searching for answers too, just like they are with the thyroid issue. But then I tell them something like, well, did you know your adrenal glands also make estrogen and sex hormones too? I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, your adrenals produce estrogen and testosterone for both men and women. So when you're stressed out, your adrenals are usually firing all the time. So the first 14, 15 years of your teenage adult life that you're just stressed to the max, you're burning adrenal fuel, which means you're cranking out tons of sex hormones and aldosterone for your blood pressure and cortisol for your stress. And eventually something's got to give. The adrenals basically suppress the thyroid because the adrenals have a direct connection with the thyroid, but you're worried about suppressing your sex hormones down here. And then there's an insulin issue with PCOS and gestational diabetes. That's a hormone issue. And the typical response that if you can't get it under control, what do you do with all your hormones with a woman? Take them out. I had a lady a couple weeks ago, one ovary was taken out because she has cysts. She's got the other one. Hope that one's working well because she's still cycling. And I know this is maybe some new stuff for you guys, maybe not, but the way you have to look at it is it's part of who you are as a human, right? Your basic needs. This can show you if you have a deficiency in serotonin or dopamine production. When you give this to someone, the light comes on. If a woman doesn't have estrogen and you give them estrogen, the light comes on. Same forth with hormones. Anti-inflammation is the other thing. All right. What you're getting in your IVs right now is what I would recommend to someone that's producing inflammatory estrogen. Why? Things like DIM is an herb, right? You give to a woman in premenopausal state. Wild yams is a good choice too, but guess what? There's that soy issue again. Can we convert it over because it's pseudo soy? I don't know. Could, very well, right? You have the genetic factors and all that stuff. We know that's the case, right? So then I think DIM. What DIM does is a liver detoxer. It goes into the liver and it dumps out all the inflammatory estrogen you're producing. Bodybuilders know this term as an aromatase inhibitor. You take a pill called an anastrostol, and whenever you're doing too much testosterone, these guys get man boobs. My nipples are changing. They're sensitive. What's going on? Dude, you're shooting up too much.
They look like hard balls.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It looks fucking weird.
Yeah. So what do you get? You give a Remedex, and it basically blocks that estrogen E1 going to that tissue. Because guess what? You're probably predisposed to inflammatory issues too. But you know it's a natural aromatase inhibitor? DIM, milk thistle, turmeric, resveratrol, quercetin, NAC, glutathione, alpha lipoic acid, to some extent NAD. But it's cool because if you look at this is a liver detoxer because it activates something called the methylation cycle. And I'll leave you with this. When it comes to your inflammatory response, you can get all this stuff in here. And if you wonder why people feel good off of this, it's because we know those reactions are going on in the body. You're inflamed. You need a detox. You're going to come back and say you slept better, you poop more, you're losing weight, your skin looks better. And I'm going to say, I wonder what kind of shit's going on internally with you, right? So think about that next time when it comes to hormones, whether you're eating something, putting something on your scalp, or blocking something from coming out. How do you detox? Detox on a daily basis, hopefully get rid of some of that estrogen. And get the good kind if you need it. Comments? Yeah.
Well, I was thinking more like, what do you do if you don't, I mean, how do you not get pregnant? You just like hope the best?
See, the problem with that is that I can't speak for right? I mean, so one of them's like it's what they're made out of. So like the IUDs, there's certain materials in there that release certain things, and then there's also what the material's made out of, like the wire. Well, there's a copper one, and that one's supposed to be safer because copper's not supposed to have like some effect like the other ones do that could cause like a cyto kind of response.
Don't tell me.
That's my theory, actually, but I don't know. It might just target a different receptor that produces a different kind of progesterone.
I think it's like the hormones in there because it's just like the copper.
Yeah, I know.
So there's like, it's kind of like, I don't want to say the middle. I'm not really good on it, but I think it's like
So I had my tubes burned, and I stopped taking birth control 2 years ago. So am I producing enough estrogen? How do I know when I don't have enough estrogen?
So what you would do is you would do a blood test and keep track of during your calendar, because I know every woman, keeps track. If you can say like day 12, day 20, if you imagine, that's when I should be ovulating, and you look at the numbers, there's a range for everything: estrogen, progesterone, LH, FSH, even testosterone. And if I know at day 14 it's at its highest, and then 21 it's also pretty high, and you're not producing in the range, then I'm guessing I see a trend. And so the production of it is this: the second that you switch from basically menstruating to not, that E1 gear kicks in. Like, it just happens. Like I said, that's what we're born with. What happens when you do synthetic stuff to your body, it kicks it into overdrive. It's like accelerating into self-destruct mode. That's what happens in Alzheimer's. We all are at risk for Alzheimer's. It's just whether or not we choose to push it in that direction quicker than normal, right? And if you look at a typical American lifestyle, I don't know what we're going to look like in 40 years, 30 years. we don't even know the science behind all our technology about what's coming out because they're suppressing all of that right now, literally and figuratively speaking, right? Because who knows what's going to happen with it. But you imagine that they told you when you were pregnant, don't stand in front of the microwave. We have a microwave in our pockets at all points. And the interesting thing is, and I'll tell you this, and this might seem sick, but when it comes to self-breast exam and self-testicular exam, they're even going so far as to say a woman shouldn't even bother doing it because it comes down to the idea that they might have a false positive and they go running to the doctor's office saying they need another mammogram. And it's an unneeded test. And it's going to drive up the cost of ding, 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 insurance. They went so far as to say men don't need a digital rectal exam, which back in the day was you go into the doctor's office and there we go.
We don't need it?
You don't need it anymore. That's what they're saying.
Already got to.
So
Those
We're
are
gonna
not
meet
needed.
into our old
Those were an example.
yeah.
I'm not even wearing a white coat. Look at us.
So I feel
Dog right there.
so when I was coming on your podcast, I literally didn't try to seek out vegan sponsored fucking studies and research articles. I just said like soy and cancer, and I couldn't stop stumbling upon research articles from Cancer Institute, Harvard, and whatever it is, that phytoestrogen, which is what we're talking about when we talk about soy. So soy has this bad rep. I know I saw Thomas, but Thomas, you probably drink more coffee than everybody here, and that has more phytoestrogen than any tofu that I could ever consume. So if we're really talking about beer and coffee and phytoestrogen, we have to then say, well, we shouldn't be drinking coffee then if we're scared of that, and we shouldn't be drinking beer if we're scared of that. Okay, but I noticed when he said something bad about soy, I go, like, fuck that tofu. But then again, like, we shouldn't be able
If
to
I
pick
like
and choose.
tofu, I would eat it.
Right, and I'm not saying it's not about taste preference. I'm just saying purely from nutrition standpoint. So all the research I found was that phytoestrogen actually has isoflavones, which are plant compounds that actually mimic and I guess react properly with estrogen receptors to prevent prostate and breast cancer. And all these women who have breast cancer from dairy and whatever it was from all the mammalian estrogen we're consuming, all their rates were actually going down by consuming soy milk on their breast cancer diet. So it's like, where do we have a bad, I think soy has been implanted in our brain in such a bad light only because it's such a versatile product and it could replace meat, it could replace milk, dairy, whatever it is. Like, so then we think about the really underlying issues of why we're afraid of said things when we should really be also concerned about coffee, beer, the barley, and like.
Not a counter, it's just an add-on. But can it just also be that biodiversity is a real thing, and that if someone's body reacts negatively to soy, and then maybe right,
Yes.
but not even necessarily like him where he's
Allergic.
not necessarily even that, but like where it can manifest as breast
Genetically, your
cancer or
body
something
can
like that.
actually change.
Right, but with you, maybe like just to use an example, it doesn't have the same effects, or with her, it doesn't have the same effects. So you
But
get
then-
a group of people in a room, and
Two of the same women that are twins, or not even twins, could go through what you said, and one of them could have the effect that you talked about, which is super beneficial, and the other one could because of biodiversity.
and that's what I mean. I just feel like
So it's a variety. Both are right. But there is study. I think I'm going to overarchingly full circle this and say what he said kind of embodies the fact that a plant-based diet, all the data does show at least a majority. I mean, in terms of general statements, it's more about estrogen today than anything. But plant-based diets are included. Coffee is included. Everything is included in that. But if you eat more plants, you'll be less inflamed. You'll produce less
Correct.
bad estrogen
Right.
generally.
And yes,
And so that's
100%.
but a lot of people don't know that.
Exactly.
That's what sucks.
And so, but what I'm saying is,
But then
the
for
soy-
biodiversity, you should do a blood test. I should do a blood
Oh,
test.
dude,
Thomas should do a blood test
100%.
and see how it responds.
Yeah,
So-
I'm gonna do. That's why I asked Ross before he said,
Dude,
"No, I'm gonna get into that
yeah.
blood
We're
kit
both
thing."
this guy
I'm gonna
asked
do
me
it too.
today if he could send us, me and any of my friends, kits. So
Yes.
all of us
Yes,
to
look
get
at this.
kits.
Estrogen diet. Let's
Do
go.
we like do it ourselves? Like blood testing kits or something.
What happened?
Yeah,
we have
I have a
someone
yeah.
to get off it, and then they'll try
What about this coffee? Is it the way it's brewed too? And when it's brewed, what's better for the
So I'll say this.
A lot of it with soy is
Anything.
there's a lot of shit.
Yeah, but the GMO soy is being fed to our animals that we're eating. So then we're consuming it way worse through a middleman. Garbage shit. GMO, yes. So it's like because all soy that we usually should eat would be non-GMO. All the tofu that I get, organic, non-GMO. 90% of GMO soy is fed to animals. So it's like, that's what we need to look at. And Thomas is not going to make an argument because he always has to be Thomas, which is fine. But the thing about it is, he's not looking at all the studies that were done with meat consumption and the heart disease and the cancers and like our colon cancers. Like, that's really responsible too, because meat stays in our Oh, eggs. Well, eggs are it's the estrogen. Animal products do not have estrogen. So that's why if somebody like Thomas is like, I love this. But if you're saying something soy because it's higher estrogen, you shouldn't drink coffee. You should also not eat bacon because you're getting real animal versions that would react better because we're all healthy animals compared to we're not spinach. So that's like one of the real differences in terms of plant compounds versus animal. I know, like I'm having like fishes and growing my beers. I used to be on that side too. It's like a lot of people are not willing to adhere to and listen to.
It's gonna happen. It's just
it's like yes, I'm not even worried about that part specifically.
I know. I was actually having a conversation with somebody about why don't men do birth control? Because actually, we could have a baby 365 days a year. Women can only get pregnant once for 9 months. So why wouldn't we be the ones responsible for controlling our sperm?
Females are a little bit easier to regulate. Males constantly produce sperm.
I know I say that now.
You damage the sperm, you damage the DNA, then you get yourself infertile. Like, how do you show supply of balance?
But do you think they felt that way when they were first starting with women? Like, because they wouldn't have known, like.
Okay, so go back and look at how birth control started. Like, look at the history of it. It's very interesting. It was all female research and female right because they didn't want to have children because they were in slums, they were in poverty situations, and they were, some women were selling themselves to make money, so they were trying to keep themselves from having babies. That's how it started.
Where this discussion
It's a very interesting, but also very sad.
Let's go away from coffee.
And I was also going to answer your, give you a kind of a head, read this book. Okay, this is really like the holy Bible for plant-based. There's a lot of information in here about estrogen and about protein. So I'm not an expert on it at all, but I want to say it's a lot of just how you do your ratios. So this is the Bible right here. Yeah, this is really like.
That's how you do it. If you're taking soy and you not feel like shit, or you notice because you're turning that into.
Yeah, and that was my question. The coffee thing is because they're.
But like, do you guys become like head rushes? I feel bad. I like feel that out. That's okay. Okay. Just since you have the nap, I didn't want to hit you guys too hard.
Yeah, well, I'd rather use the decision fatigue now. So
All that shit.
I already took that.
Whatever's in that.
So something's wrong with you. Maybe something's wrong. I didn't light up. No, I took that. I just thought the same. Something's wrong with them, right?
So you're not going to feel like
Give it about 2 minutes. We'll just go and eat it.
For what?
You just feel like a need to rock and roll.
the way this is traffic doesn't bother you as much.
I'm a happy guy, man. I mean, no, I'm trying to fill out this thing.
Yeah. So and how is it?
4 meals.
I know it's like
Are you sleeping 8 hours a day every
That
time?
is stressful. That's where I get so
That's a lot, right? So
because of over abuse of
No, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I've dealt with insomnia my entire life. So when it comes to addressing everything, I work around.
There's also some things that are less
until I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, now I'm
not the same body like I'm like, I dare, I'm not saying he's a no professional slavery. I know everybody can be a doctor and yeah, no, I'm gonna say that they're gonna say everything. You don't like fitness program for inadvertently by the byproduct, you would have
whenever I do address my sleep, I think it might be because I think not. Yeah, but that's what I do. And when it comes to me addressing my sleep, for me, it's I'm so conditioned from not sleeping for so long that throughout the day, I don't know how to function with sleep. I get
ask you this right now. What can you do right now to get better sleep? And actually do
the problem with GMO is
less work.
just the fact
Yeah.
that
What else?
because once you're genetically modified doesn't necessarily make it bad. It's the fact you're gonna be resistant. I don't understand sugar point on it.
Supplemental
So it's not the fact that it's GMO, right? It's the fact that it's liquid.
I don't.
And that is the health.
Oh yeah,
So that's why I went to less work because or like one time better right when I work right because when I get inside I would do like the lead it's already at night. I'm supposed to be asleep. Because the rest of my day is already so packed with everything else. I mean, try to address my health, do my work, take care of my clients, make sure I'm getting my food.
Yes, some people gotta get it.
That's why we all talk about imbalance, and right now, like in the most factual, not any kind of tone attachment, any kind of anything, just factually, you're imbalanced. So there's almost a romance to it. There's almost like a quick finish to it. But like to imbalance,
that romance thing is
we all like.
Right?
No,
What are they
so
feeding? How are they not giving
you
so if it's a healthy free range,
like if the thing is you're like
fine. Right? But if it's not, you can't decide you're gonna burst it a little bit more because you like it.
How important is it? Because right now we don't actually know.
I get something back here that's like like trying to do this. So that's why we like to say, right?
This is the best diet ever.
If it's working, whereas I had a
6 hours
sunflower oil that if I don't know the I can't guess whether it's organic or not, right? If I know the company and they don't have organic label, I don't give a shit. I know it's
well just call off the day.
like it's fine.
I tell my clients don't make it if it's below 6. We're wasting time.
So like
literally.
Think about
If you get 8 hours, you gotta eat like shit.
for years,
Or if
some
you
people were
sleep
like,
like 5 hours,
wasn't enough
6
for
hours,
the
but you have
now there's like
all this life.
Oh,
You still
yeah.
need to target 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And that's the ranking. It's first every time.
But if you remember,
That's what I'm
I
trying
did
to
hear
address
some
now.
baby powder. Baby powder. Oh yeah, baby powder. I heard about that. But they got slammed for recently.
Pinpoint structure on exactly what I need to do.
And how big
I need to structure my day.
Bro, it's hard. I'm with you, man. Like,
Obviously,
I
know
know because I was really upset.
Yeah, I need Yeah, and I don't even say the names because that's how higher up it is, but that's what made it as a company. And after 80, 100 years of this company being like, and it basically said, yeah, that's like kind of bad. And I don't know where it's at now. I don't know if they revamped it or they.
And I'm not going to tell you I know exactly what it was. However, like some research I looked at,
where the security guard lies and the driver at night and all the parts at night.
I mean, how they
It's like it's right out of house or something. 2 points on the
Yeah. So it's all about the
no
source
going around. There's no
right?
creating like a
It's weird.
upside
The
down
minerals
schedule.
are in there,
Like
you
those
look at like
graveyard
cobalt. right?
When
And
it's
you
going
look at
down, the body
just
just
think
like
about
literally.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's I know you're great. I'm just trying to insert a little bit of gravity into it. I'm like,
This is literally 20 years.
Right?
You know what?
Is it going to be nutrient?
I'm talking to them.
And if it's not, what else is going to be
I
in
think
it as well, right?
more than 2 to 3 times. What exactly? We're all less than 2 hours.
So you couldn't have a mix from John made up?
I don't know, I have insomnia I've never had. Like,
You have
So insomnia relates to depression and anxiety.
my thing was watching like it
Well, I'm saying, but that I can say
And I was thinking, you're right.
I feel good. I feel like for a minute, I've been like,
You're trying to feel like on it.
They basically were smart as hell in sociology. They were telling the city, like, you're gonna build it, the way it's building, you're gonna ruin all the money. That's what's creating fire. So that's why it's green, but everyone would go get it, right? But what they were really trying to pull across was the hilarious. State salamanders.
So what
Because
is
there's a salamander.
So until you get trees on the ground,
They say you can't fucking drill on it because these blind salamanders, they're here, and it's the only ones that don't grow. So,
even at night,
imagine if I said like all that shit.
Keep that time on top of your
literally, I would look at my phone to see what time it is when I'm going to sleep, put it away,
It's a little
lay down,
bit
and get myself to go to sleep, not asleep
You
for
might
2
feel it
hours, 3 hours.
Experience that I want to clear my anxiety when it comes to like this. Like
Where one outfit is. You're not halfway done. You're good. That's one less city.
You have depression, and Cameron has had some depression. I've had those as well with my trauma. So I know that the guy who has all the microsigns in place can have a traumatic experience, and this does just shit for the insomnia. My question to that guy and me, and I did this, and I got out of it, but that doesn't mean that's right, right? Bioavailability,
Say that one thing is right.
you and our weak.
No, like,
The question by big charges in a
there's no way
specific
that's
something
true.
like, there's no way of thinking people.
You know what I mean?
Saying,
But I feel the same way
what
about
are
being
our arsenal of
there's
things
no way
that
that
are we really doing? So if it is an emotional thing we can do, or emotional fixing, what are we doing?
It's gotta be somewhere.
And also along with that, like, my ass is basically like, I find the right helper would say, like, full circle, like, just like more power, right there. Our go-to like, it's a guy still. It's this guy that says that we have to, like, you literally genetics.
There's a
change
company,
those.
a
Epigenetics
nonprofit
is real.
in town,
Inflammation,
and I've been
we can
reaching
change
out to
that,
them.
and then nutrients.
You hear this?
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
reach out. It's
that,
food
like,
screening.
then you start
They
having a
have
fighting
a job.
chance.
Yeah, so that's what, but that's what I'm saying.
They
When you're
were
telling me
doing
to address
it.
this, I'm already.
Yeah.
So when I have people telling me like, oh, well, just do it, that means.
I gotta, and I'm sorry I said like that, 'cause I know that can frustrate you.
Yeah, because like that's why like when me and Bias are not constantly talking about what is stressing me out, because I know that that is what I need to do. We're constantly addressing what's stressing you, so that.
And I'm glad you said that, because the way you responded helps me realize, dude, Let me clarify. I'm not saying music exclusively because I saw it and you're like, yo,
Yeah, we could do it.
I like
I
that.
don't think doing this
Yeah.
like these-
I have a legitimate fear of going to sleep because I cannot feel safe in my house. So when it comes to my insomnia,
So I
it's not
told you,
just what I'm
I
eating.
told
I
him
love
about
my
this
green
idea.
I make sure I get my
I
green.
like-
Are you getting counseling?
I was before, but that's also why I make sure that it comes and I keep my brain around me.
I said that and I addressed that.
Started
Fires and I said it last time we talked about some stuff too, and it's like we said that we associate
So I
health
said, how do
and
you do it?
counseling. There's this
So
negative
several
aspect for some odd ass reason.
No,
And
I was
one,
in
they're like,
therapy
you have to
before we
regenerate
got
the
here.
soil.
What I'm saying is it exists in general. I'm not saying you responded like that. I'm even addressing when I said, have you got
Yes,
counseling? I
farmers
said it very clearly.
invest in the idea.
But I just feel like I
regenerate
We're
all
little
of the
bit-
you have to go
like-
for it.
Yeah.
You literally just left the
And
gym.
it's all about the country.
I have a friend.
That's exactly how I feel.
But I want to say, you're right. I'm not- I shouldn't hear my
But they're so productive.
What I said just now,
They're
I'm
so
not
good.
saying like-
But they suck. My butt and my butt and my quad.
Some odd ass reason. I said it.
You guys gotta go check out some.
But I'm saying-
Fringe sport. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But I'm saying, yeah, like,
What is
what
local
are
here?
No, live. Go on, Smith. Oh, live, live. Okay. So kind of close to here. Kind of close to here.
I mean, yeah,
You know,
it's
and
just-
that's so you're like,
Yeah, it's only it's like 17 minutes from where we're earlier.
so with the brain, like,
Or west. We're town on.
that's sort of philosophical.
We're west. We're west.
It's like,
I knew that because we were like, we passed the we passed the beacon. Were you like big into the
like, that what you do, counseling is like the IV treatment for anxiety. You
Can
know
we
what I mean?
plan this? Can we plan it over here? And to where it's just an abundance. They put so much in Parks and Recs anyway that you would probably have foundations and philanthropists that would probably take care of it.
Yeah.
You sound smart.
But yeah, I agree. 'Cause I don't see counseling as like
Helps with
I
the
go
So,
to
counseling is a IP, bro.
yeah.
Because IP is an analogous counseling for my mental, because this is helping my liver and my brain.
Like you
On
should
a
hear
micronutrient level, as I said earlier, right, as a big focus. What are we doing on non-micro? What are we doing macro, or like even like realms? Like we look at personal training as like sacral planes and frontier and posterior, whatever. All this, we have different methods and movements. When it comes to my being, am I hitting metaphysical? No, for real though, like, dude, I want to divide me like a fucking video game character. They've only helped me do this because I'm like, okay, I got this pentagon of things I need to hit.
It's almost
But shit, that's only physical pentagon. What about the spiritual pentagon? What about the actual brain pentagon? This dude, counseling is, I
Especially when you said
think, the
that you had
idea.
your,
Yeah, and that's
just that they
like
work,
whenever
like,
I'm talking with
I think you'll feel
clients or
better if
anything,
you're
like,
it'll kind of help
Friends,
stabilize
right?
the
Friends are like the
But I'll
workouts
tell
of
them, like,
that.
this is how my brain works. This is how I receive things. Like, and I'll say things like very directly, like when it comes to talking. Like, I'm one of those people that like a lot of people think that I'm abrasive and just blunt because I take emotions out of when I say a lot of things. And I'm like, all right, here's the information. There you go. And it's not because I want to hurt anybody or I'm trying to, act like I'm higher than somebody. But it's like, let's just bypass all this other stuff, get to the nitty gritty, and work.
So people say you're blunt, but then let me ask this: have you done work? So two things, real quick. Don't answer it just quickly. Do we do the work to not be blunt? Because sometimes this point too is we use I'm blunt. And I'm not saying you did. We as people, and I've heard this a lot of times. A lot of people that aren't as mentally mature as you are use the excuses I'm blunt when it's just an easy way to not have to do work, to communicate, to relay a
Yeah,
message.
some people just ask.
So well,
Well, the thing, we can be less blunt. Like I'm German, and we're blunt as fuck all the time.
I'm learning to be more aware of
Exactly,
how
and I
people
love that.
receive
Some
things.
people aren't open to that. I cannot be blunt, even though I was.
Exactly. It's all perception. So
All
whenever I
things
talk
are
to
possible
somebody,
to change. That's what I'm trying to say.
Whenever I'm
Same
talking
way.
to somebody, I do my best to put myself in their shoes. Like, if I were to receive that, if I were this person with their mindset, how would it be taken? So sometimes I don't even say a word. I'm sitting there smiling.
with your blood,
you're not gonna receive.
I bet with your blood, if you realize your blood, you're probably like, shit, I'm sorry, bro.
Yeah.
I can be like,
The message has just
That's what makes you different, and that's what is that information that you're perceiving.
instead of
The only way
Like, you're
to
getting
like,
ID,
somebody
you're
else
getting
will
you're gonna get counseling. I'm saying like that's
You know what I mean? Like, it's
like
you're
like, I wanted you guys to know
are,
about,
like
by the way,
circle, my circle. When I say you guys, I'm just
it's
talking
true.
about me. But like I get counseling. I'm gonna do class. I'm gonna do Estrogen-Why because your ass, I know this for a
Literally
fact.
everything you say here about the amino acid,
You're not your citizen. New Jersey.
I was
You gotta
really
realize that's what's up.
about all
I
the
guess in
kind
a
of bad
long way this has been.
stuff that can come with a piece of salmon, and I can't
You know what I mean?
recall
No,
the
for real.
phrase.
Well,
And it's like,
also why, like,
oh, He-Man, yeah.
This was the worst thing we've done at the
Little
start of
animals.
we had the gym. You taught me this.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Right?
They did it in the
And the other
same
one,
way.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's like scientific, like, so that's why it's compound, yeah. And another really cool part of the document, it started out where they were integrating bones and they found out that gladiators are actually primarily vegetarian. And the only reason why we thought that we were purely carnivores was because
It bypasses your liver, so you're not detoxifying.
and the animal body plant compounds would not get plastic. Yeah, and they're chiseling out the bones and putting them in the process. And you're just like,
I
you
said
know,
I would myself be like that would be an example of hope that we can better.
Popeye, dude.
No, I mean, I would say can spinach, dude. You know, like, but it's so funny. Like, I just like having, but like, with the whole thing, and then our ancestry and everything.
No hope.
We're basing it off the things that we've just been told instead of actually
We're all
looking at
starting
the
on
science behind. And we get accidentally brainwashed because this dude is fucking future ripped that we don't know what he's taking. Like, I just realized yesterday somebody told me that most of the bodybuilders in Japan are taking. I thought that you could just look like that off of like diet and exercise. I had no idea that like the dudes were just like obviously I knew Arnold, he's the king, he was juicing for everything. But like even nowadays they have to have a natural fit body and they piss test you, drug test you to look like that. And I was like, I had no idea. I thought it was just illegal. Whether you can't do drugs anymore, you can't fit.
So
real quick,
there's that documentary, I don't know if we talked about it, My Favorite Son of Pastor. Okay, great documentary because it brought up a good question. If you're doing this in the bodybuilder world, nobody's there to supervise. What does anyone care? Right? And no one does, right? Because the truth is, it's for glory, but you're not getting in trouble for any reason for trying to achieve that glory. That's why wrestling. They used to
Like diabetics and stuff like
right.
that.
So I think nowadays we have those categories, we have the natural and all that, and we have even vegan and all that stuff too. But if you look at like even advertising for like a
So I think that was very right.
or whatever, a diet supplement or whatever, those guys are on that stuff.
I mean, I've never seen that. You want to watch the natural ones on them.
No, because they don't want to see that. I mean, if you take a Superman doll compared to what it was 20 years ago, and they have more of like these, and all of a sudden it's like bigger here, I'm like, dude, that's crazy because the body issues are the same thing for guys. If you look in the gym, the guys are the ones looking at everyone else too, and be like, damn, dude, and you just start looking, like, and you kind of gauge, and then you see some people are like this, they can't do this, and then all of this is skinny.
Yeah, and then also there's I noticed a ton of acne and skin issues from, oh my god, when I see like when I see acne from these like hormones or whatever, I'm just like, your back is
I'm gonna go deeper just so that we have that understanding. I don't want people to
Not necessarily.
no, I'm not saying back knee is a thing. I'm just saying like if somebody can't touch their own back and they're just big like dudes with the little pesky legs, it's like, yeah, I could see that you would be.
I don't
If you were to ask them, are you happy with where you're at? They'll probably say no, only because they're saying I could be big, body dysmorphia or more right. But they, at that point, you say, are you worried about anything that's going on with your heart or your other hormones? They're gonna say, be a little.
Anything that makes you anything that's self-esteem, is that right? Makes you happy. Like, bro, I struggle with being happy every day, regardless of the energy that I bring to everybody, regardless of how happy I am. I literally condition myself.
Heard that like
I was telling this one of the other day.